Hey gaming friends, Gaming Geek here with a video on how to play Vanguard, Mantic's fantasy skirmish game. And so the things that you're going to want in order to play the game is you need to go online to their site and print out or have an electronic copy of their summary sheet as well as their rules. They do have the basic rules available for free. If you want to pay for the full rule set, you do need to either download the PDF and pay, I think it's $20 some for that, or buy the hardcover rulebook, which is $40 US. But what you want to do is separately you can print out this summary sheet, which is really helpful, a summary of all the rules, quick reference guide, and this does a pretty good job with most of the rules. Also, look at the descriptions below to click on this handy reference sheet that I made of all of the special rules, as well as the power purchase descriptions here. How you can spend your power points on special actions that you can take with your army. Also, you might want to download and print out the FAQ that they have also for free and available at their website. So these are the three resources that I'm going to be using through this tutorial, as well as referencing the rulebook. Also, what I got was the two factions. I have the Night Stalkers over here, and what's really handy is the cards that come with each faction. And I think that is one of the best things about these packs that cost about $35, $40. And you get 15 15 models from each side. On this side over here we have the Forces of the Abyss with their corresponding cards, which I think is super helpful. I also bought their tokens, and so you don't have to use their proprietary tokens, but these tokens came with a bunch of objective markers and scenery and things like that. Came with this objective, which is in one of the scenarios in the book. So you also need 8-sided dice, bunch for each faction. Here I just have them color coded like this. And also you need their proprietary power dice. You don't have to buy these. Someone online has come up with how you can translate regular D6s. And I'll provide a link in the descriptions below if you want to just roll your own dice and calculate and count up how much power you have each round. I have these markers. You can use dice to keep track of how many power points you have for each side, but you can use whatever system that you want. Other than that, you want a tabletop with terrain. Again, go ahead and click here if you want to see how I made and painted all this terrain, as well as these battle mats. So that is basically what you need. I also have a ruler. I have one of these rulers. I'll also provide a link where you can download this as well if you want to print this out on cardstock and just tape the edges. It's a handy way to measure distances, or you can use a tape measure here like this. Another handy tool that I have is line of sight laser, because in this game it's base to base, basically determines line of sight. That is it, pretty much what you need to play. So let's go ahead and move forward into the rules. This isn't a particular scenario, but I set it up just for an example of going through the rules. Let's go ahead and take a look at one of these stat cards and go through it together. Here is the faction symbol up on the upper left, the name, the cost, point cost when you're building your army, some keywords. So this command means that it is a commanding unit, which will give it additional dice to roll for the power dice. Here SP means speed, that's how many inches it can move. The ME is melee, it needs 3 pluses on D8 rolls to hit. The range, it has no range attack, that's why it has that dash there. Armor save is a 4+. Nerve tests is 4+. The number of wounds is 4, and the height is 3. That's the height value. It also has these abilities called Sixth Sense, Crushing Strength, and Cavalry. And those are the keywords for all of the special rules. that I mentioned before. Make sure you print this out and you can look at all of the special rules that it has. For example, Sixth Sense here allows the person being attacked to turn around and face the attacker. Also, some units have their own special abilities. So here it says Expert Rider. This model can also claim the +1 melee attack modifier for its cavalry special rule against targets of equal height, not just those of lower height. And this is how many dice it rolls in melee. It's 3d8 dice as its base attack, and it needs a 3+ in order to hit. So that's a basic stat card, relatively simple. The first step that we have to do in a game is to roll off to see who goes first, or who has the option of deciding who goes first. So red is for the Forces of the Abyss, blue is for the Night Stalkers. We do a simple roll, it's a tie, roll again, and the Abyss, Forces of the Abyss wins, and they basically will defer and say that the Night Stalker should go first because they want to see how they position themselves. You only roll off for who goes first the very first round. Subsequent rounds, it's whoever has activated their last model first, they will end up going first for subsequent rounds. So keep track of who is finished activating all of their models. But the first round, we're going to go ahead and have the Night Stalkers go first. Now we have to roll power dice. And how you do power dice is basically you have a base of 3, and you look at the number of command units that you have. And so again, it's with this keyword up here. The Abyss, Forces of the Abyss, only has 1 command unit. It's here, and he adds 2 red die. So for him, we take the base 3 red, add 2 more, and we roll that to see how much command we have. That was a pretty bad roll. Now for each command unit, you can re-roll 1 die. And so we have 1 command unit, we can re-roll 1 die, and we gain 1 more for a total of, you count up the swords, 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 4 command to spend this round. And any command that you don't use will be lost. So it behooves you to go ahead and use all of your command each round. So we'll use that as a marker. And then here we actually have on the Night Stalker side 2 command units, both a Butcher Flesh Ripper, which will add a white die, and the Reaper Soul Drinker, which will add a red die. So with our base 3 red, we add 1 red and 1 white. White dice are better than red, and blue dice are the best of all. So because we have 2 command units on the Night Stalker side, we get to re-roll 2 dice. And whenever your command units are taken out of the game, then you are not allowed to re-roll. And so here we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 command or power points to use. So now we're going to go ahead and start with the Night Stalkers, and here are some standard actions that they can take. And for each action, each unit can do 2 short actions or 1 long. And so short action options are to walk, to shoot, to stand up, to do a melee attack, to cast a spell. Although casting a spell is a variable, and it will say on the spell whether it is a short action or a long action. And then the long actions are run, which is moving twice the model speed, and to brace, which improves your armor by 1, to break away when you're in melee. That's it. Those are the basic actions, and so not too complicated. So let's go ahead and do a move action, a standard walk with our scarecrows. Scarecrow units here, they are basic grunts, and they have a speed of 5. So let's go ahead and move this guy for a short action. He's going to move 5. And in this game, you can go ahead and turn anytime during its move. You just go from front of the base to front of the base. So that is a short action, 1 action. Along its move, you can change its facing. Even if you activate a unit and you only want to turn the model, because facing does make a difference in this game, that does count as a short action. but as it's moving along, you can change its facing anyway. So even at the end of your move, he can be facing backwards if you want. But he's going to actually want to engage with this guy who is approximately 8 inches away. And so he's going to do a run action in order to close that gap. And run is twice his movement, which again, his speed is 5, so he can go up to 10 inches. Now, let's say that these hedges were in between. And this counts sort of as difficult terrain. So any short barriers like this, that is within 1 height of the model, it just takes 2 inches to cross over. And so this 8 inches would now require 10 inches to reach, which he still has. So he will be able to go across and go base to base. Once you go base to base, go ahead and turn the model so that it is touching, since these are square bases, and you can do that. Now, normally this would count as a charge action. So a run turns into a charge action if the moving model had line of sight to the engaged enemy before it moved, which it did. It had line of sight there. And it took the most direct route it could to the target, only deviating from a straight line to avoid impassable terrain or friendly models. Yeah, I forgot to say, in this game, you do not have a free pass going through friendly models. Friendly models do count as obstacles, so you have to walk around them, the same way that you have to walk around enemies. Also, let's say here, he wanted to actually engage with this guy. He wouldn't actually be able to make it because he would have to stay away at least an inch. You can't get within an inch of other enemies if you want to engage with somebody. So he didn't have enough movement to go all the way out here and stay around him and engage here. So it was best for him just to go up here and charge him this way. And when you successfully charge, you get a free melee attack. Now, in a free melee attack, you also will get a free bonus die. And so he normally rolls a 1d8 for his attack, and he needs a 6+ to hit. He would gain another additional die and roll 2d8 instead as a bonus for a charge during that first attack. But because, let's say he had to go through difficult terrain or through a hedge like this, he loses momentum, so he loses that +1 die. So you only get that +1 die when you have a clear line to attack him. Let's say he was here, he needed 10 inches. He could go around like this and avoid that obstacle. It's still the closest path that he could take to get there, but he would still get the +1 die because he was able to avoid it. But once he actually has to go over this, he loses momentum and he loses that +1 die. He still gets his free attack. So let's go ahead and resolve that free attack. And let's say that this bush wasn't here. So for that first attack, because he was charging, he would normally roll 1, but he's going to roll 2 because he gets that additional die for charging. So he's going to roll these 2 dice, and he needs a 6+ in order to hit. So he only hits with 1 of them. Now after he hits, only 1 succeeded, we go over to the lower abyssal, who is also a grunt. He has an armor of 5+. And so what he does is he rolls the number of die equal to the number of hits. So if he would have gotten hit twice, he would be rolling 2 armor rolls. But he only got hit once, so he's only rolling this die. And he needs a 5+ in order to successfully block it. And he does. So that 1 potential point of damage does 0 because he blocked it. So in this game, 1s are always failures, and 8s are what's called exploding 8s. So if I roll an 8, I get to roll another die, and if I roll another 8, then I get to roll another die, and so on and so forth. So that's why it's called exploding 8s. So 8s are really good because it increases the chances of hitting, and you gain more dice that way. So this guy went ahead and he So this guy went ahead, he ran, and he charged. He made an attack but did no damage. Now, after someone makes an attack, the defender has the option of retaliating. So let's look here how retaliation works. Unless knockdown or both activated and fatigued, a model that has been attacked in melee and has survived may now retaliate. Turn to face the model to attack and resolve as normal. So he's going to go ahead and retaliate, and he has a 2d8 and needs a 5+ in order to hit. So he's going to roll 2d8. Oh, here's an exploding die. He's going to roll another one, and has basically 3 successes. And so that's 3 hits against this guy. So he's going to roll over here. The Scarecrow has an armor of 6+. So he's going to roll 3 of his die, and he needs 6+ to block them. And he only has 1, so 2 hits go through. He's a grunt and has only 1 hit point, so he is removed. Now, if he was not a grunt, he would actually get what is a nerve test. So let's pretend he's not a grunt. So any unit that is a non-grunt gets what's called a nerve test, and basically it's a saving throw. So here he only blocked 1, so 2 hits went through. He only had 1 hit point, so he was killed with 1 additional point than was needed to kill him. And so he's going to get a -1 modifier to his nerve test. So he's just rolling 1 die, and he needs a 4+, but it becomes a 5+ because he was killed by 1 more than needed. So he needs a 5+. He doesn't make it, so he's actually removed from the game. But let's say he did actually make it, and what happens is the model survives with 1 wound remaining, but is marked as fatigue if not already. The model is also knocked down. And so we put a fatigue marker next to him, and also he is knocked down. If you don't want to put your characters down or your miniatures down like that, you can just use this marker to signify that he's knocked down, but I don't care about him going down. But he's still engaged with him. And he still has 1 hit point left. But again, that only applies to non-grunts. So let me go ahead and explain fatigue to you. Any model that has a fatigue marker next to it can only perform a short action for that round. So let's say this guy had a fatigue token. So for this round, he can only do a short action, which is to walk. He's not able to run, which is a long action. And so at the end, so let's say he walks his 5 inches. At the end of the round, he's going to go ahead and remove the fatigue marker, and that's how you get rid of a fatigue marker. The other way to get rid of a fatigue marker is to use a PowerPoint and clear fatigue from any model. And what that does is, at the beginning of the turn, I would spend a PowerPoint to remove this to give him his full activation. A long action or 2 short actions. You can also spend a PowerPoint to do what's called a force fatigue action, which is to use on a character that has already been activated. You cannot force fatigue a model who's fatigued, but let's say this guy was already activated and did his action. I can spend 1 PowerPoint in order to force fatigue him to give him a short action. So maybe he does a fight or something like that. Force fatigue can actually have him do an action that he did during his normal round. So if he did a melee combat round during his normal turn that finished his activation, he is actually allowed to do another combat when he is force fatigued. If the retaliating model is not already marked as fatigue, mark it as such with a fatigue counter. So for retaliating, the cost of it is that he becomes fatigued, but he still gets his activation later. If he already has a fatigue counter, but he has not already been marked with activated, then he receives an already activation token. So in essence, what this does is it allows a defender to retaliate twice per round. So let's say this guy attacked him next. He would be able to retaliate against him, which would give him this activation marker. And then if a third guy came and attacked him, he would not be able to retaliate. So once you have the activation marker, they are not allowed to retaliate. So now I want to talk about what's called group activation. So let's say it is the Abyssal side turn, and I will nominate my Succubus Lurker as the primary unit to be activated, and then I can pretty much activate with it in a group activation any character friendly unit that is within 3 inches of it. So I could choose this guy here, any of these guys, to be in a group activation up to 3 models. So here what I'm going to do is what's called a group assault, because I don't want to do a group shoot because none of them have ranged attacks. So I'm going to do a group assault and have these 2 guys activate with her. And how I do that is I go ahead and do all of my movement first and then resolve melee attacks. I will go ahead, and she has a movement of 6, which makes her plenty in range of this guy, and she will be able to get a charge bonus, so she'll get an extra die during her attack. Secondly, she will go, and again they have a range of 6, which she has to choose either the same enemy that the initial character moved to, or any other enemy that is within 3 inches of that target. So she could have targeted any of these guys. And then finally this guy, he's going to go ahead and just move around his friendly and engage with this guy down here. So now that I've moved all 3 in this group activation, I'm going to go ahead and resolve melee attacks. So let's go ahead and do this first. So when you attack someone who is knocked down, you get the same bonus as if you were attacking them from behind. So one of the things about facing is a character who is facing forward here has line of sight anywhere from this back base, if you draw a line, to the sides and forward. Anything that's behind back here, there is no line of sight. So if he was here like this, he would not have line of sight to these guys, and if they were to attack him, they would gain a bonus of attacking from the rear. And the bonus is pretty much -1 to their armor roll whenever they make a successful hit or attack. So here, as this guy is prone, he's going to get a -1 to his armor roll. So he's going to go ahead and attack, and again he has 2d8, needs 5s to succeed. He's going to roll here. Oh, rolls 2 1s and totally whiffs it, and so nothing's going to happen there, and the bonus doesn't even come into play. So I'm going to go ahead and mark this. Oh, I'm sorry. This guy was already activated. If he wasn't activated, he would actually be able to retaliate, I think. No, he can't retaliate because he's knocked down, right? So he would not be able to retaliate anyway. So she's going to go ahead and attack him, and she's going to get a couple of bonus dice. So her base attack is 3d8. She needs 4 pluses to hit. So she's going to roll these base 3 dice. But because she successfully charged in, she's going to gain a bonus extra die. And because he's outnumbered, gets another bonus die. So I get to roll 5 dice. And basically there are 4 successes because she needed a 4 plus to hit, or 3 successes. And so he's going to roll 3 dice and basically needs a 6 plus to hit or to save, and still 1 goes through, and so he is dead. When you successfully kill an enemy, you're allowed to move 3 inches in any direction. And so what she will do is actually go over here and engage him and attack him a subsequent round. She actually doesn't get her attack off, so she has to remain where she is. And both of them will be activated because even though they only went their short distance of a walk, which is 6 inches. In order for it to qualify as a charge, they actually have to opt to run. So even though they didn't need to run to reach the spot because they were within 6 inches, you need to declare a run if you want the charge bonus and the free melee attack that comes with that. So they are both activated. So that's how group activations work. And you can do that also with shooting, a group shoot. And this is how it works. Let's pretend these guys, here's an obstacle, and these guys don't necessarily have line of sight, right? And let's say they can all shoot, and this guy's within 3 inches, let's say. What this does is enables me to either walk then shoot, or shoot then walk. So as long as she has clear line of sight, because normally they wouldn't be able to, she's able to declare group activation. They can all move. She's just going to stay there. He can move here, and he can move there. Now they all have line of sight and can shoot. So she's going to shoot him. There's going to shoot him, him, like that, as long as they're within 3 inches of the initial target. The other thing to consider with ranged attacks is, let's say these guys started here. If I make my move like this, and I hit one of the obstacles, and I want to gain the benefit of the obstacle, I have to square up against it. And what that does is it gives me cover, but I don't have a cover penalty going this direction. If this obstacle had been here in between, then he's obscured. If it is a completely free, unobscured line of sight, you gain an extra die. So that's the bonus to being unobstructed. When you're obstructed, you just roll your regular ranged attack die. And I think right now between these two armies, the only character that has a ranged attack is the Flame Bearer. And so I would get an extra die if it's unobstructed. The other bonus that I get is if I am on higher elevation than my target. And this is where elevation is a little too complicated, I think, than it needs to be. Because it says here, a shooter on terrain and height is 3 or more height levels than the target, then I get a +1 modifier. I don't get another die, but to my roll, I get a +1. And I think this whole thing about how high things are and using height numbers and things like that is just too complicated. My house rule is, as long as you're taller than the other character, as long as you have height like this, you're going to get that bonus modifier. All of this nonsense about height and how it affects line of sight and the calculations I think is unnecessary. Just use real line of sight rules that you would with any other game rather than adding up all the numbers. And I think that just works just as well. Especially because the height advantage is a +1 to your roll, which is significantly less of a bonus than adding another die, which is the bonus that you get for a clear shot. So +1 is just you roll the die and this would become a 4. So that modifier is less of an impact than having clear line of sight. In this case, she would get both clear line of sight bonus as well as a +1 to that roll. The other rule to note is flying creatures. So the gargoyles here are able to fly, and they can basically ignore other models, terrain, difficult terrain, any of that kinds of stuff. And so let's see, the gargoyles movement is 7, and so in this case they can go across all of these obstacles all the way over here and ignore any penalties for moving across. Again, like jumping over this, walking over this would require 2 inches of movement to go across that. Flying models can ignore that. Other actions to go through. Any model that is knocked down must use their action to stand up. So that is a short action, and because he was fatigued, that's the only thing he can do is to stand up. He can't even attack. At the end of the round, he would be activated and we would remove the fatigue marker. Or again, I can use a PowerPoint to clear the fatigue, which enabled him to stand up and then get an attack off if I wanted to. Let's talk about brace and what that means. So brace is a long action, and basically the only thing you can do is turn. You can't actually walk or move, but you can change your facing. So let's say he was like this. He doesn't want that guy to be getting the bonus of hitting him from the back. And so he can turn and choose to brace as his long action. And bracing is this icon here. and we put it next to him, and for this whole round he will get a +1 to his armor roll. So here his armor is normally a 6+, he would lower that to a 5+. So that is what bracing is, and that would be, as it's a long action, that would finish his activation. Talking about breaking away, I can choose for a long action to try to break away from this engagement, and how I do that is basically I have to roll a die for each enemy model that's against me, making an armor roll. So I need a 6+. So in this circumstance there's 2 enemies against me, so I have to roll 2 die. And I need a 6+ in order to successfully break away. These are failures, and what I would do is for every fail, I would take a point of damage. Let's say that I was actually successful with one of them. That means I would take a point of damage because I failed here, but because I succeeded, if I'm still alive, let's say he had more than 1 hit point, I would be able to run, which is double my movement. For him it would be 10 inches. I would be able to run away in any direction as long as I didn't go within an inch of an enemy model. Now let me give you an example of fatigue. Like I mentioned before, you can use a PowerPoint to force a fatigue on a character that has already been activated to give it a short action. But the regular fatigue option is after an activation you can choose to give it an additional short action by fatiguing it. So let's say this guy here who's a spellcaster, I'm going to choose during its activation to run it, which is double its move, and its move is 5. And so let's say that the move total of 10 doesn't get it close enough for a melee attack. What I can do is, even though this was a long run and normally would have ended its activation, I can choose to fatigue it by placing a fatigue marker to give it a short action. And what I'll do is, because he's ranged, a ranged attack is basically a short action, and I will use Firebolt with a range of 9 inches and piercing 1, which basically means their armor roll is reduced by 1 point. But here I need a 5+, and I'm going to be rolling a range of 2d8 dice. So I'll roll these 2. And I need a 5+ to hit, so both of these will be hits. I get an exploding 8, so I actually get 3 hits here. So that's how I fatigue, and again, I put the fatigue marker here. I am not allowed to force fatigue him later because he already has a fatigue marker, and next turn I will either need to spend another point to remove the fatigue, or he only gets a short action, and at the end of that activation I can remove this. Also in this game is something that has to do with morale. So you take nerve tests when half of your units are gone. So when half of your units are gone, before you can activate one of your units, you have to make a roll check. And so let's say this guy here, the Horror, his nerve is a 4+. So before I can activate him, I have to make a nerve test. I failed my nerve test. What I have to do then is immediately run to the edge of where I started the scenario, and each scenario will tell you which edge you're starting from. But let's say that they started off of this edge. His movement is 5, so he would immediately go backwards. He'd have to go over the hedge, which requires 2 inches, so his total movement would be effectively 8, so he would move here, and he's activated at this point. So he really can't do anything. So whenever you fail a nerf test, you basically lose your turn and you're moving backwards. And that's what happens. You have to do that with each unit when your army is broken. So those are the basic rules of the game. And pretty much you just go back and forth until all of your units have activated. Obviously group activations are powerful, but they do cost 2 power points. And so you have to use that strategically and sparingly. But that's basically how the game works. The rules are relatively simple. It is more complicated than Dead Zone, but I like some of the changes that they made. I like that they went away from the grid system of Dead Zone, because then we don't have to use the proprietary mats, and we can use all the cool terrain that we have. The game does run relatively quickly. They did add nerve tests, so they do get saves The non-grunts do get a saving roll, which was added from Dead Zone. But I think it's still a pretty simple enough system, and combat is resolved fairly quickly. So I do like the game, and look forward to comparing this to Warcry when that comes out later this summer. Hope this was helpful. Go ahead and click the subscribe button and check out some of my other videos. But we'll see you next time.